growth accompanied with culture and innovation. Whether you look at the consumer market or whether you look at the talent market or you look at SaaS, it is cluttered. Anyone who's involved in hiring should be asking some very tough questions during the hiring process. I don't think of myself as a business HR leader at all. I'm a business leader and I happen to focus or specialize in people or HR.
Right. Hello everyone. We are delighted to present this special segment of open forum discussions with varied industry leaders that we intend to bring to you all. Having had 2 decades of experience in the executive search space, we have had an opportunity to work with varied leaders, and to kick off this series, we have one such stalwart from the HR fraternity, Mr. Sudeep Ralan with us, with whom I've had a privilege to work with him personally. And welcome Sudeep on this show with us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Before we actually delve into the array of questions which our team has actually kind of, shot across for you, we would definitely like to spend some time in understanding, how has been your journey with the kind of 2 decades that you have spent in the industry, the kind of varied experience you've had with larger organizations to the smaller startup world, right? It'll be very, helpful for all of us to gain from this valuable insights that you have had, the kind of experiences and the kind of lessons that you have probably learned during this journey. We'll be very obliged to hear this from you, Sudeep. So over to you.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to be here, and thanks for inviting me to sort of kick off this, these sessions. I think it's really cool that you're doing this. I think there's a lot of value to be added through conversations like this, and I look forward to hearing the questions that the team has for me. Accenture was all about growth and building processes and dealing with scale and complexity. GSK was a lot about change because we were changing as a business and the business itself. And Walmart became a lot more about growth accompanied with culture and innovation, right? So we grew a lot during that period of my journey with Walmart. I worked with great people across India and the US to really help set up and drive the kind of practices we had in India. And then true to my love for diversity, I've done different industries, as you can see, and then one thing I hadn't done was startups. So I joined Upstocks, which is a fintech sort of online trading firm. Spent nearly a year with them, which was really fun. It was very good to get that experience and work with a very different set of professionals and very different kind of mindset again. I feel the biggest change that I've seen over this period is the fact that organizations and teams have moved from being like a well-run orchestra, which is preset, determined, run by one person, clear lines of authority, everyone has a fixed role to play, nobody steps out of the boundaries, to a jazz band, where everyone has a role to play, but you support each other. There's a lot of improvisation going on at the same time. You are connecting constantly with your audience or your customer and connecting with them and iterating at the same time. And there's no one real leader, right? There are multiple leaders coming together. And I think that's something that all of us as business or HR leaders need to wrap our heads around, right? It's not a very easy transition to take up, and that change, I think, is what is critical. The other principle that I've always believed, and this is actually one of Accenture's previous CEOs, Bill Green, used to say this, is 1 foot in today, 1 foot in tomorrow. I practice that for myself, always thinking about today, but also always keeping an eye on what's next and what's going to happen tomorrow. And similarly from a work perspective, right? Do what's right for now, but keep a longer term view of things. And I think the last question on the slide is really the one which I feel all of us as individuals and organizations obviously should be asking ourselves, which is, what are we about? What is our brand? Whether you look at the consumer market or whether you look at the talent market or you look at SaaS, whatever you look at, it is cluttered. So how are you going to stand out? What is your authentic self, not a projected self, not the Instagram self, but what is your authentic self that you're going to put out there,
Yeah.
and which is going to define what you are, and which is going to define what value you bring. Right. So yeah, this has been my journey. This has been some of my lessons so far.
Pretty interesting journey, I think, Sudeep. Thanks for sharing this story with us. I'm sure our viewers are going to definitely get inspired with a lot of things which Sudeep has gone through. I personally have witnessed few of the aspects, and honestly, Sudeep, the time when I remember we spoke about you moving on from Walmart was a time where I myself couldn't believe that, thinking about Walmart without Sudeep, is it possible? I mean, honestly, a big question which I'm sure would be there in the mindset of a lot of HR leaders. The kind of work that you have done there, amazing. So thank you for sharing this with us. But do you feel this transition, from a larger organization to a startup world, or vice versa? What is better? I mean, what is easy to kind of comprehend?
I think it's a question of what mindset you approach it with. I know one of the things you wanted to talk to me about was about what kind of skills leaders want to build, right? And I keep coming to this. If you have the agility mindset,
Yeah.
and saying that I'm ready to take whatever I have as an offering, but I'm also ready to adapt myself to change, then you'll be fine. But I think if you can't, then I think either of these changes
Right.
will be extremely, extremely difficult.
Right. So Sudeep, you've also helped, hire and manage leadership teams, across different organizations, right? What approach would you recommend to assess a leader's cultural fitment, right? The cultural alignment with the organization during the hiring process?
I think that's one question that everyone struggles with. And I don't think that anyone has found the right answer. I mean, search firms like yours
Right.
partner with organizations like ours to constantly find the right answer. Again, repeating what I said earlier, right? I feel that as HR people, we tend to rely too much on the process. I remember the first such assignment that I had, where I was responsible for hiring and integrating a new business leader. I was spectacularly unsuccessful. I did everything extremely well, right? I got a great job description in place, super detailed. I don't remember, I was working with a search firm at that time who got great. So everything went as per the whole thing, right? The briefing was good, the interviews went well, offer, everything went well.
Yeah.
Person onboarded, within a month, the verdict was out, not going to cut it. And he himself felt it as well.
Okay.
Right. So it made me really question to say, if you do everything right and still the outcome is so dramatically wrong.
Yeah.
I realized I'd forgotten to ask some fundamental questions. Right. Who are the people that this person will really work with?
Right.
Who will determine their success? Sometimes it's not just your boss who determines the success.
Yeah.
Are the right stakeholders involved in the assessment? Have the stakeholders connected with each other,
Right.
and had a open, honest, frank discussion about the candidate,
Yeah.
right? Or has it all been done through emails and documents and people just sort of ignoring what each other said?
Yeah.
Have we asked we have these briefing with the CEOs and so on, right? I think a good question to ask is, what do you not want this person to be?
Yeah.
What do you not want this person to do?
Yeah.
I think these are some informal checks and balances which I think can assess a person's potential cultural fit into an organization far better than processes. I'm not saying processes are not important.
Yeah.
They're important, but they are just an enabler.
Right.
I think especially for leaders, especially the kind of investment one makes in hiring and onboarding and integrating a leader, and
Right.
the cost of losing one or someone not working out is just so high.
Yeah.
And I feel that anyone who's involved in hiring should be asking some very tough questions during the hiring process. Relying on a good JD and relying on a good set of skill sets is just not
That's
enough.
not enough, right? No, I personally, in fact, had an opportunity to kind of, work for Accenture on their hiring front, and I've noticed, they're taking 14 rounds of interviews, for one role, and finally, after all those rounds, deciding that this is not a great fit, so it really keeps pointing out, to those similar set of understandings that where, do you really kind of pinpoint on those KRAs, that should be kind of, ensured are kind of filtered out before you even kind of start talking to the person, right? So I don't know whether it's a 100% foolproof method, honestly, Sudeep.
They never can be.
It can never be, right?
Unless we get AI to do this. It will be interesting to see whether we can replace the entire human aspect with AI.
Yeah.
And whether a generative AI model can actually pick up cultural nuances better than humans can.
Yeah.
Because we're all clouded by our own judgments and biases, right?
Right.
How do we cut out our own judgments and biases?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
That should be interesting.
Interesting. So taking this a step forward, while I think, you did touch upon this topic, but I felt that, it will be important for us to understand, what are those essential skills that you feel in the next generation of leaders, that they should equip themselves with, looking at the kind of crowd that's coming into the industry now, right, with the kind of change in the attitude, the change in that agility of the people,
You said the word agility, right? I spoke about this earlier as well. I do feel that a lot of our leadership focus is still too much around skills and experiences. And while skills and experiences are super important, but what is actually going to be very, very important for leaders to continue to be successful is a mindset and a value system of agility. I was part of a talent review discussion a few years ago, and we were talking about a leader, and we talked about them and great track record, excellent delivery. The leader was able to, whoever was representing them was able to talk about their journey and so on. And then we went around the room, and then one of the peers asked a very good question saying, what next?
Right.
Can they do XYZ? This is where our new opportunity is coming up. Can they do XYZ there?
Yeah.
And there was silence. And the answer ultimately was no. And that made everyone pause, and clearly that person's career paused. And people wonder, saying, I've been such a great performer. I have done my work. I've achieved this. And yet, why is my career slowing down? Why is my career pausing?
Yeah.
And not everyone is able to go back and transparently articulate it to them why as well.
Right.
But these are often the reasons.
Absolutely.
The ability to think on your feet, to quickly respond to changes that are happening in the environment, to work with different generations of workforces, to be technology savvy, at least, even if you're not an expert, the ability to work across cultures, the ability to put your hand up when your organization faces a problem and say, look, I can go and solve this, and have the confidence to do that. I think these are the most valuable skills that I think leaders of the future need to possess.
Absolutely. Interesting. So some of the questions, Sudeep, which also popped up from some of our leadership team members, right?
Right.
One specific ask from ours was an essential part of HR today, right, is also about culture, right, when we look at it. But do you think it is actually the HR's responsibility, right, to create a positive and inclusive workplace culture that values diversity and promotes employee engagement, right? How do you think an HR leader can create a difference here?
Yeah. First of all, yes and no. No to the point that, your HR teams are normally 1% of an organization's headcount or less than that.
Yeah.
So there's definitely, they can't take responsibility for the culture of thousands or tens of thousands of people. But what they can do is be an enabler, be a custodian, and be a conscience keeper. Because you, as an HR person, can set up like fancy presentations and decks and do great initiatives, but culture is what's happening on a daily basis. Culture is what's happening on the ground. When I joined GSK, I spent time on the ground and I spoke to sales executives in my market visits, and I would ask them, saying, where have you come from, and why did you join us, etc. And I'm going to speak in Hindi for a bit, because otherwise the tone will not come through. But when I spoke to one of them and I said, "Aap kahan se aaye?" and so on, said, "हाँ, यहाँ से," and this and that. I said, कैसा लगता है यहाँ पे, और कैसा है यहाँ पे? And he says, बहुत अच्छा है, यहाँ पे ना कोई गाली गलौज नहीं करता. It was, I paused for a moment. I said, like, गाली गलौज, like, which is abusive language. But then I realized that that's probably what he had faced in many different organizations that he had worked with. And I had heard that sentiment get repeated by multiple sales executives across multiple territories that I did a market visit on. And I realized that was a very, very big part of the culture, and why people were joining us and staying with us.
Yeah.
Because compared to other organizations, on the ground, the sales managers were respectful always. Aggressive, but respectful. Right? So that lesson keeps getting repeated in different forms all the time. So there's no point in having, great initiatives and great LinkedIn posts, etc. if your CEO in a boardroom is going to behave rudely or talk in a non-inclusive manner or be intolerant or any of that, because the CEO sets the tone, or whoever the HR or the head or whoever it is, right? That person sets the tone at the top gets set and it kind of trickles down. So I think the role of the HR person is really to be that kind of custodian and conscience keeper, and that's why I keep coming back to the point and then the importance of having an independent point of view. That is truly what HR professionals, and when I say HR professionals, I mean across the industry, including people like yourself who are working as partners, right? You need to be able to have a strong point of view, an independent point of view, and be able to replay back the kind of stuff that you hear. That I think is a big role that HR has to play in creating the right kind of workplace culture and inclusion that you said.
Right. But there's still a long way to go, I believe, to actually achieve this.
Well, depends, right? I mean, obviously everyone has a long way to go. Nobody can ever be perfect and so on. But I do believe this, the fact that inclusion comes up as a topic in every single conversation is a very good thing. Right? The fact that it's on everyone's radar, the fact that even if you pay lip service to it, right, you at least are paying attention to it as a topic itself is a very good thing.
Yeah. So, in fact, that's where exactly my next question flows into. So while we are speaking about inclusion here, right? Do you believe ageism is real? In fact, this is, I don't know, a very sensitive topic, honestly speaking, Sudeep, because a lot of people are kind of, moving to that stage. Should companies, in fact, actually acknowledge and tackle with this is what we want to understand. Is there a kind of a merit in reconsidering the age factor, considering the significant contributions experienced leaders can actually make to the organizations today, right? So what are your thoughts?
I mean, I do believe that there are plenty of topics around inclusion which we're not even addressing,
right?
For many reasons and so on, but ageism is one for sure. Or even in India, we are such a diverse country, right? We don't necessarily talk about inclusion or non-inclusion related to language or backgrounds or, God forbid, caste, right? It's a taboo topic for right reasons. But these are genuine issues on the ground. I mean, we are all human beings. We are all brought up with our own mindsets and our own biases and our own whatever, right, backgrounds, and you are the same person when you come into office. You don't turn into another human being. You at best just suppress it a little bit because you're trying to stay aligned to the organization's sort of line, right? So I do believe these are genuine issues, and that's why while I completely adore and I love and I think it's great that we do stuff around International Women's Day and Pride, great milestones to celebrate and pause. But I think the pause and the reflection should not just be about that topic at hand, whether it be gender or whether it be the LGBTQ plus agenda. It should be about the broader inclusion conversation, saying how do people of a certain age feel when they are part of groups which are of a different age? How do people from a certain community feel when they are part of a group which is of a different community, right? Those, going a little bit deeper, asking our leaders and our managers to be a bit more aware and sensitive to this is definitely something that I feel organizations should be doing a lot more of.
True. But do you think there is actually a prevailing fear of limited job opportunities that develops in the mindset of these kind of leaders in the industry who are probably aged 55 and above, right? Leading them to actually be hesitant about in fact taking those kind of risks and challenges which they could actually kind of do justice to with the kind of experience that they carry behind them.
You're now speaking to my fears, right?
Well, we are almost kind of all of us are going to actually go to that stage, and I think it's important that we actually.
I know I've been thinking about that for myself. I've also been connecting with a lot of other people as well. I do believe there are some fears and apprehensions, but I do also believe that there's a lot that individuals can do to be a lot more, what should the right word, marketable in the talent market. Like I was saying earlier, right? It's really important to know constantly what's your brand, what's your value add. And unfortunately, the talent market is exactly like a market. It's a function of supply and demand. So depending on what skill you are putting out there, there is some degree of supply and demand. And if you happen to be part of a function where the supply is a lot more than the demand or equivalent to the demand, then by virtue of the fact you are of a certain age or certain location or whatever, right? You could be a little bit held behind. So how are you going to market yourself? And market yourself doesn't mean being salesy. Marketing yourself means taking stock of yourself as a brand and rejecting what's not going to work for you. Right? You can't always carry this baggage of I have 2 decades, 3 decades of experience. You know, I do this, I have done this. Well, you might have, but there are plenty of other people out there who an organization can hire for at probably the same less compensation than you. Then why should I hire you? I mean, don't make yourself out to be like a, you know, like a CSR activity, right? It's not. So I think being able to ruthlessly analyze yourself, shed what's not working for you, not get hung up on your experiences, be ready to be flexible. I know a person who a couple of years ago I met them, and you know, they were talking about starting a new part of their career and so on, and they just came and said, you know, I don't mind, I can do this project for free. And that's actually a no-no. You should never do stuff for free idly. But the person's confidence was such, saying, anyway, I'm not doing this for the money. I don't mind doing this for you. And if you like what I'm doing, we'll start engaging more as a contract. And I thought that was a very nice, flexible, very smart way of doing things, right? I'm not saying that's the right approach to follow. I'm just saying one just needs to be a lot more flexible and think on their feet. You can't, life is not a corporate ladder. There is no such thing as a corporate ladder. Life is a function of lattices, right? Going left and right and up and down. So you have to be comfortable with that.
Right, absolutely. Finally, let's moving across to the HR part of it, right? Just thought of actually understanding, you know, do you feel, is there anything specific issue, you know, that probably is most overlooked by the HR? You know, is there anything that you feel HRs, instead of saying refuse, I mean, you know, they actually overlook. Is there something that they consciously refuse to look at? Do you feel is there?
No, I don't think I'm not going to put myself and get myself lynched by my community by saying anything they refuse to look at. I don't think there is actually. I honestly feel HR people are usually overloaded with working on 20 things at the same time and trying to control 20 topics and issues at the same time. So I don't think there's anything that HR people refuse to look at. I do feel though that amongst the plethora of people-related agenda and topics that we have to focus on, change and leading change and driving change is something that keeps cropping up. So it came up 2-3 years ago when COVID started. Everyone was talking about change and change and change. But if I talk to, and I do continue talking to, for example, learning firms and OD firms, when they come to me with the propositions, very few of them are talking about change. Very few of them are talking about building a mindset of change they come back to the same leadership development agendas and the journeys. So I think HR people do need to spend a little bit of their mind space, more of their mind space, equipping and formally working around creating a culture of change in organizations and in leaders, right? How do you build a mindset of agility and change amongst leaders? That I feel is something that will keep happening every few years with the next crisis that comes along until that becomes a much more institutionalized way of working.
A couple of things which comes to my mind, you know, is about how open are HR folks to, you know, embracing the technology advancements that we see today happening, right? I mean, do you feel that's something which needs to be kind of, you know, consciously looked at? Because
I mean, see, everyone is aware of it for sure. We're all reading about it and watching stuff about it and so on. I think HR people, by correctly so, are a little bit more cautious about it, because the stuff that you deal with is people-related information.
Right.
And compensation related information and stuff like that, which can be very, very sensitive.
Right.
So I think what you may see as HR people being a little bit risk averse is actually them being a little bit more cautious than some of the others. But having said that, I mean, look at, for example, the large organizations, right? They are doing a fantastic job of leveraging technology. I mean, HR teams were using AI long before it became fashionable to talk about it, right? They were using AI-based screening systems and so on. You would know that, right? So I don't think HR is an aversion or is slow to adapt to technology. They're just a little bit more cautious about it, which I think is absolutely true. I feel the aversion is more on the business side, and I think getting our leaders to be a lot more tech savvy and tech conversant is something that HR should focus on.
What would be your recommendations to the budding CHROs of today's age?
Yeah. 3. First, if you're thinking about yourself as a budding CHRO, don't, because the milestone changes every year. Like I was saying earlier, our environment and our context is changing so fast that it's pretty futile and actually a little bit self-defeating. If you set yourself clear, sharp goals like I want to be XYZ in XYZ years, that world has gone. Right, so you have to be agile enough to constantly have a longer term direction in way, but constantly be open to iterating your journey along the way. So I think that's point number 1. The point 2 is build your ability to accept change and drive change. I think that's super important in any budding HR leader, as I would call it. And I think the third one is to stop thinking yourself as an HR leader, first of all. I feel a little bit disconnect every time I see my own LinkedIn profile which says HR leader, and I keep thinking, I don't think of myself as a business HR leader at all. I'm a business leader, and I happen to focus or specialize in people or HR. Right. And I think that's a fundamental change
in the mindset.
And I know I've used the word mindset, I think 300 times in this conversation, but I think that's a fundamental change in the way HR people need to think. You are a business leader first. Right? You have to understand your business, you have to run the business, and you happen to focus on people. I think that shift will make a huge value add to any HR professional.
Great. I'm sure our audience is going to love this segment. Thank you so much, Sudeep, for sparing this time with us, and I'm sure we will look forward to many more sessions, going forward.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here, and I like the thought-provoking questions. They've also given me a lot more food for thought for the future. So I appreciate that.
So guys, keep looking forward to many more sessions with diversified leaders that we will actually bring it across to you people. Thank you so much for watching us.